So that brings us to tonight and our special guest, Steve Friesen. So I've had the pleasure of working with Steve for many years as a senior editor at True West starting in 2013. I was in charge of all the travel writing for the magazine. And Steve, for many years, Steve, tell me again, how many years at the museum? 22 years, the director of the Buffalo Bill Museum and Grave in Golden, Colorado. And extraordinary historian, author, curator, and director of a museum on one of America's most fascinating and influential characters of the 19th and early 20th century. He is he is a specialist in Buffalo Bill, and he's written 3 or 4 books on Buffalo Bill up to date. 3 books on Buffalo Bill, one of which is his newest book, Galloping Gourmet, which I reviewed in the last December's issue. In retirement, he hasn't slowed down. He travels to Europe regularly to lecture on Buffalo Bill's influence in Europe, especially the French and the British, who have a great love for him and his Wild West, and the Lakota. Buffalo Bill, really one of his, you think about him in the United States, we're going to hear all about this tonight, but he had a great influence on Europeans and introducing them to the native peoples of the United States and the Lakota. If you want to collect his book on the Lakota, check it out on Abe or eBay, but he'll tell you, have your wallet ready. It's a rare book, but it's a treasure to have. So at this time, I'd like to invite Steve up here tonight to share his passion for Buffalo Bill, his life and career, and we're going to learn a little bit about maybe some gourmet meals we can make at home, just like the showman himself. Steve?
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Stuart. Okay, I'm going to ask you, do you know about Buffalo Bill's relationship to Arizona? No? Well, let's where to start. Buffalo Bill was one of these guys that got bit by the gold bug, the gold fever. And so about 1910, he started investing in mines in the Oracle area. And he bought a lot of land down there and started a number of mines. He got down to Tucson quite regularly in connection with that, staying at the Santa Rita Hotel. I don't think that's around anymore in Tucson, if any of you know Tucson. And he would stayed there and, of course, dined there while he was there as well. And he also, with his Wild West, came through Arizona. Now, unfortunately, he never got to Prescott, but he did get to, let's see, Bisbee, Douglas, of course, Phoenix, Tucson, and Yuma. So the Wild West show traveled to all of those places. I don't know, did you have a railroad coming into town as early as 1910? Yes. Okay, well, did you have a big fairgrounds by any chance up here at that time? Well, you had the rodeo grounds. Well, I don't know. He missed out on a real opportunity, didn't he? He missed out on an opportunity. But at any rate, in fact, he was here often enough that when Arizona became a state in 1912, it was suggested he should run for Senate, to run as a senator from Arizona. And by that time, I think he had the good sense to decide that was not in his future and did not do it. But at any rate, so that's something that's a little less known about him. But let's get on to the main topic here, which is the Galloping Gourmet. Now, I've always been interested in 2 things. I was introduced to Buffalo Bill at the young age of 8. And I was fascinated by him at that age, doing other things as well, but always having Buffalo Bill in the back of my mind as an interesting guy. But at about the same time, when I was 8, I got interested in food and cooking. By the time I was 12, I'd already subscribed to Gourmet magazine. And in high school, I enjoyed watching a TV show that I already know some of you watched. I'd come home from high school and I would watch Graham Kerr, The Galloping Gourmet. And that was very enjoyable. I learned a fair amount about gourmet food and all that from Graham. Well, when I retired after working at the Buffalo Bill Museum for 22 years, my attention kind of turned to combining these 2 interests, led to about 5 years of research and writing, resulting in the book that Stuart showed you, Galloping Gourmet, Eating and Drinking with Buffalo Bill. Galloping Gourmet was not his nickname then or now. It's simply a term that I believe reveals the Buffalo Bill that nobody knows today. Interestingly enough, he was in many ways the first Galloping Gourmet. But again, this is not known today. But back in his day, people would often write about the food innovations and the eating that went on at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. Here's a wonderful quote about Buffalo Bill as a gourmet. When you are at luncheon in the tent back of Colonel Cody's, you will get your first lesson, and a particularly delightful one. It is that Colonel Cody's table with the Wild West isn't Buffalo Bill's campfire on the plains or in the mountains. With Colonel Cody, Mr. Salisbury, his partner, Major Burke, and other pale-faced chiefs, you find you're in a jolly company at a lavish feast. This was written in New York about him dining at Delmonico's. We don't particularly associate Buffalo Bill with lavish feasting, but we certainly expect to see him on the plains, sitting around a campfire or something like that. And that's how he got his start. But he became a galloping gourmet, if you will, eventually became that, who is as comfortable dining at Delmonico's as around a campfire. This is something called pilot bread or hard bread, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Will later recalled that on one of his trips along the Oregon Trail, they got stranded at Fort Bridger, that's in western Wyoming, for the winter. Food became so scarce, they even killed their mules for meat, and were down to almost nothing by the time spring came. When spring did come, they were able to head east, and they went to Fort Laramie, which would be on the east side of Wyoming. This is what he wrote. Of course, we all had a square meal once more, consisting of hardtack, bacon, coffee, and beans. I can honestly say that I thought it was the best meal I'd ever eaten. Hardtack lasts so long and kept from spoiling that today Civil War museums back east still have hardtack from that era, from the Civil War. It lasts very long. Now, it was very hard, hence the name hardtack. So what you would do would be you would dip it in hot coffee, and that would soften the hardtack, making it easier to eat. It had another advantage that any weevils would float to the top, and you could skim them off the coffee and throw them out. Again, it was called pilot bread, hard bread. You can still get it with all this excitement I must be giving you about weevils and all. You could order some from Amazon, and they still sell it. This is in the freeze-dried version, but I do have a recipe for making it in the appendix of the book. In fact, I have about 30 recipes in the book's appendix. The 4th of July was a very important holiday for them, both for patriotic and nostalgic reasons. The show was always on the road performing on that date. It performed for about anywhere from 8 to occasionally 9 months of the year, and it was always performing over the 4th of July. So it was not a holiday you could spend with your family or even the United States. So here we see the show is in Szeged, Hungary. And they're having to celebrate 4th of July there. And that's a menu, as I said, from that time. The 4th was probably Buffalo Bill's favorite holiday. Now, let's see if I can go back. That is the show in Lille, France. It's up in the northwest corner of France. And this is the menu from Lille. You see on one side it was the red the stars and stripes, and then here you see everything from asparagus cream soup to cheese and biscuits, lettuce and lobster, all of these good things. What I can gather in reading all the things that I have in notes that I gathered, he was a social drinker who enjoyed alcohol of various kinds, particularly whiskey, but he was in control of it, not the other way around. He was a drinker, but he was not a drunk. And I emphasize that because there are people in Denver who have stories about him being drunk, and I've never found anything that proves any of that. As the years went by, Cody not only stuck with his promise to Nate Salisbury, but drank with greater and greater moderation when he wasn't with the show. In 1904, he wrote to a close friend that he only drank alcoholic beverages 3 times after 1901. Then in 1905, he had a personal spiritual awakening, and he wrote his sister Julia that he decided to stop drinking entirely. He was particularly fond of ginger ale, perhaps as a more hearty substitute for water. As Buffalo Bill's health deteriorated over the next 3 years, so did his appetite. This last photograph of him in Glenwood Springs shows a very gaunt man on his way to die in Denver. He passed away a few days later on January 10, 1917. I want to conclude with my favorite painting of Buffalo Bill. In it, we see a man who not only scouted the Great Plains, but also looked forward to, scouted, and influenced the future. His legacy is large. He influenced everything from show business to rodeo, Western movies, all the way to American and European foodways. So next time, as you enjoy a nice meal or a steak at your favorite restaurant here in Prescott, raise a glass to America's original Galloping Gourmet, Buffalo Bill. Thank you.